We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.
In a nation divided, in a time of shadows, and rises a call that echoes through every valley, every church, every heart that still believes in truth. For Christ and Country tells the powerful story of conviction, courage, and unwavering faith in the face of opposition. It is the story of a man who refused to bow. In these pages, you'll witness a modern struggle for truth, a stand not just for one man, but for every American who believes that faith still matters. From author Drew Thomas Allen comes a stirring tribute to courage, sacrifice, and the unshakable hope found in Christ. This is the time. This is the fight. This is the story of a nation worth saving, for Christ and for country.
Well, the drama continues in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the haven of communists in America, apparently. And I got to tell you, so I just posted something on TikTok, and I never use TikTok. I just decided to post it there because it was an appropriate style of video for TikTok. And I'm going to repeat what I said. And TikTok gave me a strike on my account and took it down. This is what I said. You mean to tell me that when an ICE agent kills a trained professional agitator and protester in an act of self-defense, the left and Democrats immediately call for the defunding of ICE and its complete dismantling? But when a criminal illegal alien rapes and bludgeons to death an unarmed female nursing student in Georgia who was simply out enjoying a jog, the same left and Democrat Party continue to call for and champion open borders? That's what I said. And TikTok removed the video. So much for that. You know, there's only so much appetite out there on these apps for the truth. And, you know, things like that just make me so frustrated with this protection of TikTok and everything else. Why are we fighting to, keep TikTok when this is what they do? So anyway, look, I want to start by expressing, I think, some frustration that maybe many of you are feeling as well. And it has to do with the fact that Trump has engaged in negotiations with officials, Democrat officials in the state of Minnesota, the mayor, Frey, Governor Walz. You know, Trump reported he had a very good phone call, and that's Trump's style. He always does that. And in many ways, you know, he's always damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. I'll offer a caveat in a second because I think there's more to this picture and what's going on. So first off, my frustration is that, you know, if we can't beat the left domestically at home, what does it matter if Donald Trump defeats them abroad? And, you know, look, we've seen Donald Trump fight like hell, you know, against the globalists. We just saw, and I talked about in the last episode, you know, what a tremendous performance he gave on the stage in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum. I mean, he just took it to the left. And he seems to be extracting, much of what he wants as it relates to Greenland and acquiring Greenland, or at least part of it. So that's ongoing. He's continuing to fight hard for Greenland. You have the commie Prime Minister of Canada, that weeks ago announced that he was going to side with the Communist Chinese, our sworn enemy. And this is the crux of our problem with Canada. Canada, this doesn't mean there aren't decent citizens in Canada. I feel for many of them, the ones that aren't Marxists supporting this. But the Canadian government is anti-American. If you're going to side with the Communist Chinese, you are declaring yourself an enemy of the United States. And so this Prime Minister, Mark Carney, that's exactly what he's been up to in Canada. We're not the ones disrupting that relationship. He is. If you're going to go and cozy up to the Communist Chinese who want to supplant us, who are our greatest enemy and the greatest threat to the world, frankly, right now, we're not going to play nice with you. And so he threatened to slap 100% tariffs on Canada. And Carney's come back. And actually, I'll play for you a news report of what happened. Listen to this.
So now President Trump over the weekend threatening massive tariffs on Canada. The president posting this: if Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. Now, the Canadian Prime Minister, Carney, now pushing back, saying this on Sunday: we have no intention of doing that with China or any other non-market economy. What we have done with China is to rectify some issues that developed in the last couple of years. So where does this stand?
So there you go. I mean, Carney is trying to backpedal a little bit. Now, this is not resolved right now, and I don't think it's going to be totally resolved because Carney is dug in. I mean, he's an entrenched communist himself, and he's going to side with the Communist Chinese. And so Trump's got to use whatever force and power he can and leverage to try and correct that as best he can. So my point is, you've got Donald Trump just bashing, as he should, the left around the world. And then yet when it comes to, domestic issues, like we're seeing right now in Minneapolis, he seems to be extending some sort of olive branch. And I mean, that is something that's frustrating, immensely frustrating. And I've got some ideas about what he's up to, but there's just, my gut tells me, folks, and you can hold me to this, we will find out in the coming days. My gut tells me that Trump has something up his sleeve, that he is not going to cave to the left-wing terrorists that run the state of Minnesota. But there are a lot of things happening right now, and we know that Donald Trump is very good at feinting. And you've got a couple things at play right now. One, you've got a bill that passed the House that's now headed to the Senate that is going to fund ICE. And Democrats are coming out and they're saying, we're not going to fund ICE anymore because of the havoc that Donald Trump's ICE has brought about in Minneapolis. And of course, that's a bunch of baloney. It's propaganda. The only reason this conflict has erupted in Minneapolis is because the Democrats in that state want it to happen. And I've got a crazy expose here from Fox News that I'm going to read through some of it with you in a minute that explains just how coordinated this effort is in Minneapolis to do this. And I have an article out at American Thinker today that explains to people how what we're seeing play out in Minneapolis right now is straight out of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Saul Alinsky, a community organizer, a hero of Hillary Clinton, he sought to, in his own words, foment revolution in the United States of America. He was a Marxist. And so his playbook explains the process by which you can create that revolution in the United States. And it's a 3-step process. The first step is to create a crisis. And you've got to do that because you have to find a way to motivate your indoctrinated communist supporters to get out in the street. And Minneapolis created this crisis because, look, there are more deportations by far happening in other states, and you don't have any conflict whatsoever. And that's because in those states, the authorities, the police, etc., are cooperating with ICE, and you don't have Democrat politicians who are telling people to go out and get in the faces of ICE and interrupt their operations. Nor do you have elaborate, highly funded organizations that are training people to engage in this type of illegal activity. So that's the first thing. Minneapolis created this crisis. And part of creating that crisis was they wanted to create martyrs. And, I got to tell you, one of the principal questions, central questions I try to address in my book, For Christ and Country, The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk, I think people think it's a biography. It's not a biography. It's an examination of how we got to this point where someone like Charlie Kirk could be assassinated, and then leftists throughout this country on TV who went to your high school, who are online right now, some of them even watching the show, celebrated Charlie Kirk's death, which is the kind of behavior we saw from Muslims in the Middle East when they were dancing and handing out candy when thousands of Americans were slaughtered on 9/11. The war on terror has simply come home. We didn't defeat the ideology. We sat here and watched as it was adopted by the Democrat Party, and that's what we see today. And so the next step after creating the crisis, of course, is you blame your opponent and you isolate and freeze a target. You personalize it. And so that's why you have these Democrats nonstop out there calling ICE agents Nazis and fascists, the Gestapo, the SS. They are the face of evil. And so when they get a Renee Good, they send her out there with a bomb vest, basically, like the jihadists do. And that's what the Democrat Party is today, a bunch of jihadists. The radical left is a jihadist movement and ideology, absolutely. They seek complete domination. There is no compromise with them. They are the, they believe in moral relativism to suit their cause. They don't really have any morality, but they, if you disagree with them, then you are a de facto monster. And we saw this start in 2016 when Hillary Clinton went to a fundraiser in New York, and she told the room that half of Donald Trump's supporters belonged in the basket of deplorables. And it wasn't long after she made that statement that the left ramped it up further. We weren't just deplorables. We were Nazis. We were fascists. Trump was Mussolini. And so it's this steady dehumanization that they engage in. And it's why we got to the point that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And it's why we're here today in Minneapolis with what's happening. And just to make my point clear, the Democrats don't care what the truthful narrative is. They need Democrat activists who are being trained to go out and get themselves killed. They're sending them to their deaths. And the left doesn't care that it puts the ICE agents' lives in danger. And they also don't care if the ICE agents have acted in a defensible manner in self-defense. Listen to the Minneapolis police chief admit it.
Greater issue is, even if there is an investigation that ultimately proves that at the time of the shooting it was legally justified, I don't think that even matters at this point, because there is so much outrage and concern around what is happening in the city.
That's right. So there is the Marxist Saul Alinsky playbook. Create a crisis and then emotionally personalize it. So he says it won't matter to people in the city if the ICE agents are in the right every single time. The emotions are already riding high. And so where does that lead us? To the third step, which is to present a solution. Now, they're not open to multiple solutions. The left already has a pre-existing solution, which is their overarching objective, which is to stop deportations completely, to defund ICE. And that's what they're presenting. Listen to this.
This agency has gone completely rogue. ICE needs to be abolished. It cannot be reformed, and Christian Noah must be impeached. And as the
It's not ICE that's gone rogue. ICE hasn't gone rogue at all. ICE is doing what it's supposed to do. which is apprehend illegal aliens, most of whom are not only criminals by virtue of being here illegally, but they have rap sheets that include murder and rape and sodomy, etc. The people who are out of control are the Democrat activists. Now, I actually want to go ahead and go through some of this information. Now, first off, Alex Pretty, whatever his name is, he got himself killed. And, there's a picture that's come out. Now, look, I'm going to get into some criticism too. Kristi Noem has come out and said some just stupid things, that weren't helpful and they weren't even necessary to talk about, which is, look, the guy had a brand new Sig Sauer and a bunch of ammunition when he was engaged in a fight with ICE agents. Now, I don't know about you, but if I go with the intention of getting involved in a physical brawl with ICE, and that's what he did. He intended to get in a physical brawl. I got the receipts here in just a second. If I were to go out and wanted to get in a physical brawl with cops or ICE agents, federal agents, I would not go brandishing a Sig Sauer pistol. You have to be a lunatic to be wanting to do that. That's why I'm saying these people are, bomb-strapped jihadists going out, sacrificing themselves for the left. It's sick. The left is getting their own people killed. Democrats are getting their own supporters killed. And they're so brainwashed. Listen to this. Now, look. Do I have this clip even? I don't have it up. But anyway, there's one clip in Minneapolis of one of these protesters going in front of ICE and saying, shoot me in the mother effing face, shoot me in the mother effing. These people are not rational. They are mentally ill. They're mentally ill. And I just want you to listen to the type of insane rhetoric coming from people on the left. Listen to Jake Tapper, who has this leftist in Minneapolis on CNN. Listen to what he says.
I understand that, but they take people to Fort Snelling here, which literally was built as a concentration camp, and Alligator Alcatraz, which I think we can all agree is a concentration camp. Not saying they're Dachau. I'm not saying they're putting people in ovens yet, but these are concentration camps.
Okay.
I don't need to argue with you about
that.
Yeah, Jake Tapper. The guy just said that, ICE agents are getting ready to send, people to gas chambers. Detention facilities are concentration camps. These people are absolutely nuts. Now, I just want to break for a second because I've got my favorite, left-wing people that always tune into the show, and I thank you for that. One of these days, maybe something will get through, and you'll have two brain cells that grow so that, something can spark inside your brain. But, here I am talking about all these important issues in the country, facts, and you get Gummy Pokey that says, your eyes are frightening. We just live in a totally unserious country with some of the people that, I don't know. I wonder if Gummy Face or whatever has a family. Do you have kids? Are you responsible for anybody? Do you want death and despair in this country? I don't, and that's why I sit here and do this. But let me give you some background on Alex Pretty. So, this wasn't his first altercation with ICE agents. He was already known to the feds, and he apparently had his rib broken in an anti-ICE protest a week before he was killed by Border Patrol. So he got into a violent confrontation with agents a week before Border Patrol agents killed him in Minneapolis, according to a report. So Pretty, you've heard, is an ICU nurse. Oh, an ICU nurse. He takes care of people, so he can't be a lunatic. Wrong. So he told a pal he saw ICE agents chasing what he described as a family on foot and stopped his car during the earlier incident around a week before he was shot. He said he pulled over in his car and began shouting and blowing on a whistle, at which point he was tackled by 5 agents. And his friend went on TV, I believe, on CNN and said that day he thought he was going to die, adding that Preddy had been released by agents. What kind of nut job do you have to be to do this multiple times? And notice each time it results in physical contact with this guy who lost his life, chasing this illusion that he's been fed by the domestic terrorist party, the Democrat Party in America. It's just unreal. And again, the response is not, hey, get out of the way and let ICE do their jobs. It's, no, let's double down. Let me get into the far left network that helped get Alex Preddy killed. So, ICE and Border Patrol agents were there, by the way, to arrest an illegal immigrant criminal. Preddy and others were there. They were outside a donut shop to meet them as part of a strategic pattern of organized interference with law enforcement operations. Now, this was highly, highly coordinated. Over the following hours, a national network of socialist, communist, and Marxist-Leninist cells in the United States leveraged the tragic fatality into a nationwide protest operation. Now, I'm going to explain to you, using this article, how this happened and how they're doing this. It's engineered chaos, to my point. It's Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals in action. So, the encrypted signal messages in real time show that anti-ICE rapid responders were actively tracking, broadcasting, and summoning backup around federal agents outside Glam Doll Donuts on Nicollet Avenue where the shooting happened. Local rapid responders made at least 26 entries into a database called Minnesota Ice Plates in the critical hours before and after the killing, documenting the license plate numbers and details of alleged ICE vehicles they claim to see around Nicollet. This is insane. You have a bunch of radicals in Minnesota and Minneapolis who have nothing better to do than go out and tail ICE agents and write down their license plate numbers and report to one another on these signal chats how many they see. This is like a paramilitary operation. The entry at row 344 read, at the Nicollet murder, chronicling a black Jeep Wagoneer at the location with agents allegedly involved in the shooting. Row 338 had a Glam Doll Donuts entry tracking a black Ford Taurus. At 9:50 a.m. Eastern, just before the killing, a user identified as Willow shared a 22-second video on an encrypted signal chat for anti-ICE rapid responders. 22nd and 3rd, wrote Willow, quickly following up with outside Glam Doll. Unreal. 3 minutes later at 9:53 a.m. Eastern, a second signal user, Salacious B. Crumb, escalated the alert, summoning additional responders and citing the same vehicle and agents. Backup needed at the Black Forest Inn parking lot on Nicollet Avenue, just south of 26th Street. This is a mob. These people are seeking mob justice. And I would encourage you, when you get finished listening to this show, go and read, it's very short, Abraham Lincoln's address, Lyceum address. He's speaking to a young club, the Lyceum group. This is about 20 years before he's president. He's a state senator at the time. And we know that the Civil War did come. And in this Lyceum address, he talks about this mob spirit consuming the nation. And at that time, of course, he's referring to mobs going out and lynching black people, etc. Others, too, it wasn't just blacks. But they were asserting themselves as the law enforcement throughout America at the time. And he was very clear where that would lead. And sure enough, it did lead to a civil war. When this wild spirit consumes people and they start to act like this. This is what we're seeing in Minneapolis, and it's part of the playbook. So anyway, this signal chat is traveling around the country. People in New York are getting it. People in Minneapolis are getting it. And, ICE agents are going to apprehend criminals. And you've got a network of thousands of people that are tracking ICE with the express purpose of preventing them and getting in their way. I'm sorry, if you do that, you might die. You can't do it. And so Kash Patel is saying they're going to go and look into these people and these networks. They already are. And I'm just saying, look, President Trump, like I said, I believe he's got a plan. I believe he wants to make sure that this media story dissolves right now so that we can focus again on the criminal activity in Minneapolis, not just from the protesters, but from Walz and from the mayor and from all those involved in participating and looking the other way, allowing the historic fraud that took place in that state. I think that we need to get this bill through the Senate that funds ICE. And so there are a lot of calculations that are going through his mind that we are not necessarily privy to. And I cannot for a second believe that Donald Trump doesn't understand the threat that he faces and we face, because nobody's gone through it worse than him with these people. But this has to be put down. We're sitting here waiting for the Insurrection Act. I mean, look, here's the thing. I mean, you can't negotiate with these Democrats. I told you the playbook. We know what they're doing. And we know that they effectively are trying to create a, hostage situation. And, we, the American people, are their hostages constantly. You can't negotiate with people like that. And as much as he treats the globalists around the world as a threat and talks about them, that pressure has to be maintained and kept up on the left. I mean, we've got a choice to face, folks. And I don't know why so many on the right are so apprehensive about having an honest conversation. I thought it would happen after Charlie Kirk's assassination. I thought that finally there would be a national reckoning. Because look, you've got, as I mentioned, Hillary Clinton, deplorables. Then we get to Nazis and fascists. We got Rand Paul's ribs broken by a neighbor. You've got 2018 under Trump's first administration, his press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I don't know if you remember this story. She was in Lexington, Virginia, and she was in a restaurant called the Red Hen. And the co-owner of the restaurant recognized her and booted her from the restaurant, refused her service simply because she worked for the Trump administration. So political differences for the left are no longer differences to be debated. We have to be hunted down. We have to be segregated from society, from polite society, and even killed. And whatever you think about who killed Charlie Kirk, it is undeniable that the left celebrated his death. How do we get to a place in a country where an entire political party can act like that? That's the point of the book, For Christ and Country, The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. And, this book was censored, by the way, for a month on Amazon. You still can't buy it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Target, Walmart online. Bookshop.org carries it online and other places. But Amazon now has stopped censoring the book. For a month, it was censored. And I make the point. Because, look, the left has no problem at all. The left has no problem whatsoever calling us Nazis and fascists, and we see that that's getting us targeted and killed. It's dangerous rhetoric that is leading to actual real world violence. And do they ever stop and look in the mirror and self-reflect and say, hey, maybe we need to lower the temperature in this country because of what's happened? No, they never do it. They double down. And so while the left is completely comfortable continuing to call us Nazis and fascists and dehumanize us, we seem unwilling to talk about and label the left as they are. The left has no problem labeling us. We need to label the left. And it's not hyperbole. It's not escalatory. It's honest. And if we're not going to have an honest conversation about the issues in this country and what the left has devolved into and what their ideology represents, we are not going to make it out of this. And so I've got a chapter in the book. 9/10 is the new 9/11. And that is explain to people the similarities between the radical jihadists, the Islamic terrorists, and their ideology, which does everything, of course, in the name of a higher cause for Allah, and the left who does it in the name of progress. After 9/11, seeing the jubilation in the Middle East by Muslims who were celebrating our pain, and then 9/10, Charlie Kirk's assassination, and looking around me and people I went to high school with were doing the exact same thing. People were reenacting his death. People on national television, the cable news shows, CNN, MS Now, etc. They were justifying his death. Well, can't be surprised this happened the way Charlie Kirk talked, he didn't support transgenderism. His words were violence, they said, and then once an actual act of violence took his life, that was reasonable. So we've got to talk about this as a country. We cannot let the left get away with this anymore and not be held accountable. I'm sick of it. I got 2 young girls. I don't want them growing up in a country like that. I don't want to grow up in a country like that. I'm sick of it. They don't have the moral high ground, and we keep ceding it to them. All these emotional stories they're feeding related to Minneapolis. Stop buying the false premise. These protesters are out of control. They're going to get themselves killed. And unfortunately, it's just reality. ICE agents are American citizens putting their lives in harm's way to do what they are asked to do and what the law requires them to do. And meanwhile, you have a lawless bunch of mobsters, malcontents in Minneapolis with nothing better to do than go pick fights with ICE agents and stop them from doing their jobs. And I'll return to what I said earlier in the beginning of this show that got me kicked off of TikTok. The same left and Democrat Party that calls for the dismantling and defunding of ICE after a paid protester, trained protester is killed by ICE agents doing their jobs. This is the same left and Democrat Party that after an unarmed female nursing student in Georgia, Laken Riley I'm talking about, is out enjoying a jog, and she is hunted, raped, bludgeoned to death by an illegal criminal alien that Joe Biden not only let into this country, but actually flew with the taxpayer money from New York to Georgia. And the left and the same Democrat Party that wants to abolish ICE continues to support an open border that brought about that rape and murder of Laken Riley to begin with. Make it make sense. You can't. There is no logic on the left anymore. It's gone. And I played clips on the last show and recently of Barack Obama, of the Clintons, all saying the exact same thing that Donald Trump is saying today, having the same position that I have right now. That, look, it doesn't matter. And Barack Obama says this in 2010. He addresses the people, the left right now that's so radicalized. He addresses them and says, look, a lot of people have concerns. These people are just trying to make a better life, but, we can't do this. We can't incentivize people to come here. The law is these people are here illegal and we have to deport them. And that's what we have to. That's Barack Obama saying that. And now you got Barack Obama putting up a letter, that is encouraging people to draw inspiration and support and to support. He says every American should support and draw inspiration from the wave of peaceful protests in Minneapolis and other parts of the country. Speak out against injustice, protect our basic freedoms, and hold our government accountable? What is he talking about? Which Barack Obama is this? These protesters need to be held accountable. And some of them are being held accountable with their lives, and that's sad. But, the lesson, if you're a leftist, is you're going to get your ass shot and killed doing this. And for what? Don't be stupid. So anyway, I'll finish up with this in just a second. But first, I saw that gold hit a record high today. And on that note, what do 3 billionaires, 4 major banks, and a legendary 72-year-old investor have in common? They're all making the same shocking prediction that gold is headed for $10,000 or more. It keeps going up. It's getting closer. Goldman Sachs says gold will surge 20%. JP Morgan says 25%. And one respected economist now believes the U.S. government could deliberately raise gold's official price to help pay off the national debt. We'll see. And the world's wealthiest players, they're already making their move. And now you can see, thanks to our friends at American Alternative Assets, you can see what they're seeing for free. They just released a powerful new report. It's called The Surprising Case for $10,000 Gold. And it breaks down all these hidden signals, the central bank gold buying spree, and how smart Americans are protecting their retirement with gold right now. You can go to cloutgold.com to download it free or call 855-803-GOLD. Cloutgold.com or 855-803-GOLD. Don't wait. The window is closing fast. So let's just kind of come full circle here about the frustration, what's going on, what Trump is doing abroad. First off, I there's a lot of drama because Kristi Noem she's not the best person for the job. Now, I don't want to hand the left some victory in canter necessarily, but apparently reports are that she doesn't get along with Tom Homan, who's just a bulldog. And Tom Homan is the best person. Tom Homan should be doing her job. Or maybe not, because Tom Homan has more flexibility with his position as the border czar that he can go out and do this stuff. But, Tom Homan's the one who was sent in to negotiate, allegedly, with the terrorist Democrat regime in Minneapolis and in the state of Minnesota, not Kristi Noem. And Kristi Noem, she tried to frame Peretti as some domestic terrorist planning a mass casualty event. And look, politics is an ugly game. You got to deal with the media all the time that is against you, that lies to people, and you just got to play it smarter. And, Kash Patel, he made a mistake too. He went on TV and said, you can't bring guns to protest. You definitely can bring guns to protest. Now, I don't want to get into this because I think it's a distraction from the serious issue. This is part of the reason we have the discussion. You got to focus on what matters. I mean, should this guy brought, a Sig Sauer, to a protest? No, he's a lunatic for doing it. But the broader problem is you have a highly financed organization throughout the country, but especially in Minneapolis, that is staging events to support their ongoing war against ICE. And that needs to be put down. These ICE agents are putting their lives on the line. And they're doing a dangerous job going after people who are murderers, who are rapists. And these people are getting in the way, and they're putting themselves at risk. And nobody ever talks about the side of just your American citizen who works for ICE, who is out there on the streets, already concerned because you're going after people who have these criminal records. And while you're trying to apprehend somebody, you've got to worry about protesters closing in on you, following you down the street, writing down your license plate, and now we know communicating in signal chats where you are. And by the way, you think that the illegal aliens, you think that they're not going to be able to access now these signal chats too? I mean, it's just, this is crazy to me. And if it's not crazy to you, you are insane. So you've got a U.S. carrier strike group that's arrived in the Middle East. Trump says Iran wants a deal. So he continues to put the pressure on Iran. The Abraham Lincoln strike group, which consists of the carrier and then 3 guided missile destroyers. Well, it's entered the Central Command region of the Middle East, which includes Iran. And this group, I mean, he's bringing in the big guns: FA-18 Super Hornets, Growlers, F-35 Sea Jets, helicopters. And so he's serious. And I just think Trump needs to think about this and address this before it gets ahead of him and it's too late, that many Americans, Mr. President, are seeing the news right now of you having phone calls that you're saying are good conversations with the domestic terrorists in Minneapolis here at home, while you're sending a strike force off the shores of Iran. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that. I'm saying that the optics are, okay, why are we dealing with Iran in such a serious way when you seem to be, based on reporting, signaling some kind. And here's the thing that just blows my mind too. I mean, just think about this for a second. The Democrat Party at large, but obviously as exemplified in Minneapolis and Minnesota right now, is no different than these terrorist regimes abroad. Think about it. You've got Donald Trump trying to negotiate with Iran. You've got him out there fighting the left-wing globalists, in Davos. You've got him dealing with the Greenland issue, with Canada, and them seeking to embrace China. And here in the United States of America, with other American citizens who are Democrats, you're having to go and effectively treat them the same way as our sworn enemies abroad? That's where we are in this country. And if people can't start to look at the left that way in the Democrat Party, I mean, look, I think that we can't do what I think the left always does with Trump. They think he's stupid, and obviously he's not. They underestimate him, and that can be an advantage. But, we can't pretend to put our heads in the sand and act like the Democrat Party is some sane party right now that shares anything in common with this country, with you and me, with the founding. They don't. And so you've got to strategically and mentally focus on them that way. These people are willing to use guerrilla warfare. I mean, when have you ever heard of any group or organization or Republican or MAGA engaged in some kind of elaborate operation like you're seeing unfold in Minneapolis? What's happening in Minneapolis is an insurrection. And that's what they falsely tried to claim that J6 was. I mean, even in the worst fantasy that the left spun about that day, which was highly unorganized, obviously, because nothing was achieved. But even if you accept the fantasy of the left, it's not even a fraction of what you're seeing in Minneapolis with this type of organization, from the top down, from Democrat politicians going on TV. I want to play this last clip of James Talarco, who wants to be a big dog in the Democrat Party out of Texas. Listen to this.
ICE shot a mother in the face. ICE kidnapped a 5-year-old boy. ICE executed a man in broad daylight on our streets just this morning. It's time to tear down this secret police force and replace it with an agency that actually is going to focus on public safety. We need to impeach Kristi Noem. We need to prosecute agents who've abused their power. We have to haul these masked men before Congress so the world.
You hear how unhinged these people are? And again, I want to come back to it one more time. I could give James Talarco a list of 40 American citizens, all of whom are women, who have been raped and murdered by criminal illegals in this country. Why do these people not care at all when it comes to the Laken Rileys in this country? I mean, how can they not have any response or sympathy or compassion whatsoever when illegals, due to their open border policies, are raping and killing women in this country. And there are countless episodes of that. And yet you got 2 episodes of violence in Minneapolis, which would not have happened had these protesters sat their asses at home and let ICE do their jobs. I mean, it's nonsensical. It's nonsensical. So anyway, look, we're going to find out soon, what Trump's plan is and what he's up to in Minneapolis. I do not believe for a second that he will cave on anything. Let me get into some comments here. David Howard says, Joe Rogan says ICE shooting distracting from Epstein files on purpose. I love Joe Rogan. That's one of the stupider things he said. Yeah, I mean, this is like a just such a weak clickbait. And I'm not attacking you, David, at all, brother. I'm really not. I do want to address this just as we close out the show. We live in this world where, now it's like if everything's a conspiracy, nothing's a conspiracy. I mean, it doesn't add up anymore. I mean, this type of reaction, though, the ICE shootings are not everything's a distraction from the Epstein files on purpose. What are you talking about? I mean, think about this, David. I mean, what is Joe Rogan trying to suggest here? So you have Somali fraud that we know about to the tune of $9 billion plus. These leering centers, right? And this is one of the biggest scandals in American history. And it just is total. I mean, look, it's so devastating that Tim Walz announced he wasn't going to run for re-election as governor. That's how big a deal this is. And that's how you know that this is real. And it is real. The fraud is real. Now, the only question is, how involved were Democrat politicians in allowing this or supporting this to take place because they wanted the Somali community's votes? So you've got that going on. And now nobody's talking about that, right? All they're talking about is ICE is the face of evil. These ICE shootings aren't a distraction from the Epstein files. If anything, they're a distraction from the fraud in the state of Minnesota that needs to be dealt with. So Joe Rogan's line here that ICE shooting are a distraction, and also a distraction. Donald Trump is getting these people killed. I mean, who is Joe Rogan saying is Donald Trump trying to distract from the Epstein files? He's not the one that's organizing these protests. He's not the one who's training these lunatics like Renee Good and this latest one, Alex Preddy, to go out and get themselves killed. So it's a lazy line of thinking. And I know Joe Rogan's a smart guy. He's proven it many times, but I don't understand this. This is a trap. Do not fall into this, folks. Use your brain. There's no evidence. There's no logic that points to, the ICE shooting is a distraction from the Epstein files. It's not real. All right, folks, this is Drew Allen, your millennial minister of truth. David, God bless you. I appreciate your feedback. Gummy Pokey, you're retarded, but keep listening. I will get through to you one day. I appreciate all of you, even the leftists that hate my guts. God bless you all. Until next time.
In a nation divided, in a time of shadows, and rises a call that echoes through every valley, every church, every heart that still believes in truth. For Christ and Country tells the powerful story of conviction, courage, and unwavering faith in the face of opposition. It is the story of a man who refused to bow. In these pages, you'll witness a modern struggle for truth, a stand not just for one man, but for every American who believes that faith still matters. From author Drew Thomas Allen comes a stirring tribute to courage, sacrifice, and the unshakable hope found in Christ. This is the time. This is the fight. This is the story of a nation worth saving, for Christ and for country.
Peaceful coexistence. Okay, that's the official narrative. And they would habitually go and enslave Europeans and take them back. And they would sell white flesh, which always, fetched a high price amongst the Muslims. They can't build churches. They can't repair churches. And they can't sing out loud. They can't show a crucifix or a Bible around Muslims. They certainly can't try to proselytize. The Fatimid Caliph destroyed 30,000 churches. The Islamic world, as I was kind of telling you, its entire economy was based on war and plunder and the slave system. Okay, they never produced anything.
Is radical Islam the greatest threat that we are facing in America today? This was the result of the AmFest poll. The conservative movement seems to believe that the greatest threat that we face today is radical Islam, given the dangers of unchecked immigration from places like Somalia and other radical Islamic places like Dearborn, Michigan, that's sort of overcome by Islam. There does seem to be some merit to this. And I think, in fact, that radical Islam is a huge threat. I think this is correct. Whether we can think of maybe a threat that's worse, maybe we could, but I think that it's fair to say it's one of, if not the greatest threat that we do face in America today. And by the way, the awesome thing about it is the solution is the gospel, as well as good government and common sense government principles. But the gospel wins hearts and it changes people from Muslim to Christian. And so that changes that whole dynamic. So really the solution ultimately is the gospel, but that doesn't mean there isn't a role for the government to play saying, hey, we don't want dangerous people and dangerous cultures and dangerous religions, ideologies at least, into our country. And I think that's wise. I think that's fair. And so we're going to talk about that. This is Josh Barnes. This is the show where we look at everything from a biblical perspective, or at least that's our goal, point of view Scriptura. And so here we go. We're going to jump into this episode where we're going to talk about it. And I'm going to use as my sort of content today a video by Rabin Ibrahim. It's actually on trigonometry, an interview that he was interviewed there. And he explained a lot of his research into the Muslim faith. He is a Christian, but I think he is a former Muslim, if I'm correct about that. But he is a Christian today, and he shares a lot of good information. We're going to jump right in. I'm going to start with a clip from the video. By the way, you guys got to go to Trigonometry and watch the whole interview. It is well worth your time. And I do have my producer working on perhaps getting me an interview with Raymond if he's open to that. I would love to bring him on the show and introduce him to you sometime directly. But in the meantime, I'm going to play you a little bit of his content from this interview. Great interview, by the way. Good job, Trigonometry. Super, super recommendable. This first video is on the question about how Islam treats others. Because you remember, the first one, is Islam a religion of peace? And that's going to kind of lead us into that second clip. But is Islam a religion of peace? You remember after 9/11 that George Bush said, no, Islam is a religion of peace. There's just some radicals that we got to deal with. Is Islam inherently, by nature, actually peaceful? The answer is really no. I'm going to let Raymond explain it.
John Esposito. This is a professor at Georgetown University. I don't know if he's still there. He's probably very old right now. But he was there when I was there. I went to Georgetown University for a time in Washington, D.C. And it's a bastion of kind of Islamic studies and whatnot. But I didn't know this at the time. But it was a very kind of compromised bastion. Mm-hmm. Anyway, one of his books, which is it's called Islam: The Straight Path. And keep in mind, this guy, this is in the early 2000s, let's say. He was very, very active, and his book came out. And he's the editor of the Oxford History of Islam, for example. He was the guy that, the FBI and the CIA intelligence analysts, they talked to him to understand about Islam and whatever. He has this line in his book, Islam: The Straight Path, which verbatim, I might be getting a little off, but he says, 5 centuries of peaceful coexistence elapsed. between Christians and Muslims before an imperial papal power play led to a series of so-called holy wars that have left an enduring legacy of mistrust from Muslims to Christians. So what he's saying is, before the First Crusade, which starts in 1095, everything before that, from Muhammad's life until all the stuff I'm telling you, was peaceful coexistence. Okay, that's the official narrative. So that's why I think it's very important to really highlight what you just mentioned, which is this was a traumatizing event. The sundering, the first breakup of Christendom, with most of it being conquered by this hostile faith and the rest of it being bombarded. In the 8th century, all these islands the Mediterranean islands were constantly being attacked and conquered. Slave raids were constantly a given thing. The whole idea of so much of what we know as feudalism and had to do with all the coasts of the southern coasts of Europe. So many people actually abandoned them because they were the site of raids, slave raids coming from the Islamic world now, North Africa, and they would habitually go and enslave Europeans and take them back. And the emporium for white flesh was Cordoba in Spain, which was conquered, like I said, starting in 711, and that was where they would sell white flesh, which always, fetched a high price amongst the Muslims.
Yeah. So what we're seeing, what he's saying here is that this is historic Islam. It's always been a violent ideology that has produced violence. And here's the reason why. I actually jotted some of the arguments down. So there are certainly Muslims who would argue that Islam should be as it properly is nonviolent, and they'll point to a couple of their scriptures in the Quran. I'll give you a couple of them. I jotted some down. Surah Al-Baqarah 262. Indeed, those who believe and those who are Jews or Christians or Sabians before Prophet Muhammad, those among them who believe in Allah and the last day and did righteousness, will have their reward with their Lord, and no fear will there be concerning them, nor will they grieve. It's sort of like a unifying verse. Surah Al-Baqarah 256. There shall be no compulsion in acceptance of the religion. The right course has become clear from the wrong. So there are verses like that throughout the Quran that some, sort of nonviolent apologists say, listen, proper Islam is peaceful. But there's no doubt that Islam has not been peaceful throughout its history. It's not like it was peaceful and there's a few aberrations where they become violent. Islam has always been violent, and here's the reason why. Because the Quran developed over time, and it wasn't all peace. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:191. You can tell I don't speak Arabic. It says, and kill them wherever you find them and turn them out from where they have turned you out. And al-fitna is worse than killing. Al-fitna means to disbelieve Islam is worse than being a murderer. And since the penalty for being a murderer is death, the penalty for not believing in Islam has to be death too, because it's worse than being a murderer. Surah Al-Anfal 8:57 through 62 describes enemies of Muslims as the enemies of God, implying that fighting them is a religious duty. Surah Al-Tawbah 9:5. These are just other arguments that other people would make for why it should be violent, and I'm just sharing them with you. But when the forbidden months are past, then fight and slay the pagans wherever you find them, and seize them, beleaguer them, and lie in wait for them in every stratagem of war. But if they repent and establish regular prayers and practice regular charity, then open the way for them, for Allah is oft forgiven, most merciful. So kill them unless they become Muslims, or unless they pray to Allah and give money to you. So the only times you can be at peace with non-Muslims is when they are paying you tribute. That's essentially how this is painted. This is Islam, right? This is what Islam is. So it is inherently, it produces violence. Now someone would say, well, there are violent versions of the Bible. Okay, I think they're misinterpreted if those who believe that the Bible calls for spreading the religion, the Christianity by the sword, don't understand the Bible and are misinterpreting it, right? So they're actually, what I've done is I've given you correctly interpreted verses from the Quran that say violence, right? But it would be a misinterpretation of the Bible to claim that we're supposed to be violent. There are moments in the Bible where God wanted the people of Israel to conquer a land, that he was dealing with a nation. They had to have a land. They had to defend themselves. There was violence involved in that. But they were never, once they had the land, they were never told to go conquer other nations to spread the truth about Yahweh God. They were to just stay right there in Israel and be at peace. Israel, in its most ideal state, was during the time of Solomon, when they had no wars. They were never, like, the ideal was not go out and conquer. The ideal was take your land, keep it, defend yourself, stay there, be at peace. That's the idea. Christianity is, Jesus specifically told his disciples, live by the sword, die by the sword. This is not how we further Christianity, by the sword. So it is the aberration. It is the heretic that goes and, as a Christian, uses the sword and uses violence to promote the faith, not to defend themselves, as it's a totally different issue, but to promote the faith. It is even Old Testament, New Testament. It is those who are misinterpreting and wrongly using the Bible, but it is those who are correctly interpreting the Quran who are violent in Islam, which is why Islam has been violent. Islamists, Muslims, have been violent for over 1,000 years, because that's what it produces. That's what it teaches. So what I'm saying is, you say, well, it's like Christianity. No, it's not. It's actually the exact opposite, because they're being consistent with their scriptures being violent, and Christians who are violent are being inconsistent with their scriptures. It is a heresy. We condemn that, where actually it is consistent with the Muslim scriptures to be violent. Very, very important distinction there. Okay, let me go on to the next question that he was asked, and that is how he starts talking about how Islam has treated other religions and other faiths, and this goes along with it. They want to kill those who have other faiths, and this is historically true.
So it goes back, according to Islamic teaching, remember the Caliph Omar?
Yeah.
The second Caliph. So apparently historians aren't sure where, but the Islamic tradition believes it's when Jerusalem was conquered in 637. And he came there. There's this big, narrative about how he came there and whatnot. But supposedly he made a pact. It's called in Arabic Ahd Omar, or the Pact of Omar, with the Christians. And they basically told them, here's what you have to do in order for us to not kill you, basically. And according to this pact, things that they could not do: they can't build churches, they can't repair churches, and they can't sing out loud, they can't show a crucifix or a Bible around Muslims, they certainly can't try to proselytize, they can't stand in the way of their own relatives turning Muslim. Okay, and it's a number of lists. I actually translated it in one of my books. It's called the Conditions or Stipulations of Omar. Some of them are: if a Muslim wants your seat, get up and give it to them. If a Muslim is traveling and wants to enter your house, you have to let him live there. Okay, so it's not stuff that you necessarily want to enjoy, but what it really coalesced around is, it's still evident till today. Okay, is you're just it's I guess, to give you a good analogy, is kind of think of how blacks were treated in America, and before civil rights, and that, which is kind of like, who do you think you are? Okay, to even think you're my equal, that kind of mentality is what prevailed in these Islamic societies. So if you're a Christian or a Jew, you better know your place, and don't complain, and don't, if they abuse you, or Muslims rise up and commit an injustice against you, the law is not going to come on your side. That continues till this very day.
Yeah, that's true. In Muslim-run countries, everyone else who's not a Muslim is persecuted, is prejudiced against. I mean, they're just, everything is designed to subjugate those who are not Muslim. The Muslim ideology is not compatible with American ideology. Like orthodox, correct, following all the Quran Muslim ideology, right? There is some inconsistent, Muslims who would be very modern and peaceful and all that kind of stuff, but that is not what their religion teaches, and it's not what their religion has historically always been. And if you look at any nation that is run by Muslims, that's not how they run their nation, right? So what I'm saying is that there are cultures that are better than others. There are religions that are superior to others. There's one religion that is true, that's Christianity. But there's other religions that are not as harmful as others. And there are some who are much more harmful religions. Like these are dangerous ideologies. And Islam is a dangerous ideology. It doesn't mean that no Islamists should be allowed in America, but we should be very careful accepting Muslims into America, because there's a large number of Muslims who are very counter to American basic principles, like the principles of freedom and equality and justice and freedom of religion. Islamists are generally very much against. So Muslims are not all good candidates to be American citizens, is what I'm saying. If we're going to take in new citizens from other parts of the world, we should take in people who agree with our ideology. And there's not a it's not a thing we're likely to get when we're taking in Muslims from Muslim countries.
The Fatimid Caliph from Egypt, Hakim Amr Allah, in the year 1009, actually destroyed the Holy Sepulchre.
So he's talking now about the origin of the First Crusade, because everyone says the Crusades, the Christians were so violent, awful to Muslims and to Christians, or Muslims and to Jews, and the Crusades. Well, what about the Muslim violence? And he's going to explain the origin of the First Crusade. Here's a Muslim who destroyed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and I'll let him continue.
Razed it to the ground, and according to Muslim sources, and I'm thinking of al-Makrizi, who's an Egyptian historian, he wrote that this guy, this Fatimid Caliph, destroyed 30,000 churches and synagogues in Egypt and Greater Syria, which makes sense because, like I told you, that was a very Christian, heavily Christianized region, one of the oldest. Okay, so, and at that time in 1009, the Pope of the time wanted to call a kind of a proto-crusade. They didn't have it at the time. And nothing happened. But then, as like I said, so now it's building up, and you're getting these Turks doing what they're doing, and they're killing European pilgrims, and now the emperor of Constantinople, they're right there at his doorstep. They're in Asia Minor, right across the straits from Constantinople. So he calls for aid, and that was the origin of the First Crusade.
Yeah. So this is very important. I think very important. The First Crusade was a defensive measure because Muslims were marching through the Middle East and Northern Africa, murdering Christians and destroying churches, burning them down. And now they were all the way up to, right across the strait from Constantinople, a major Christian stronghold, and they needed to defend themselves. So that doesn't mean that there weren't atrocities that took place in the Crusades. There were. But many of the Crusades, specifically the first one, were defensive measures against the violence of the Muslims. You say, well, the Christians were violent in the Crusades. Yeah, well, a lot of that was defensive violence. That is perfectly permissible in Scripture and Christianity, to defend yourself with violence. But not all of it. There was some of it that wasn't defensive violence, that where they actually took it out on Jewish people who were defenseless, and so on and so forth. But the Crusades as a whole were not all just like Christians go out of control trying to match Muslim violence with violence. They were actually defending themselves because Muslims were slaughtering Christians. Okay, the next quote I wanted to give you, the next little clip I want to give you is Rabin. By the way, go watch the whole interview on trigonometry, Rabin Ibrahim. But this also gets into the Crusades, where he's talking about the Crusades as a whole. And he just mentioned the First Crusade. This will be where he talks about some of the atrocities that did happen during the Crusades. The First Crusade, defensive measure. Other Crusades were also defensive and perfectly justified. There were some things where, especially atrocities against the Jewish people, that did come out of some wrong, evil that was produced during the time of the Crusades.
During the First Crusade, the People's Crusades, or the Peasant Crusade, went off track again and attacked Jews. Okay, And again, the church and the nobles were against that, because that's not, but the logic was, why are we traveling and suffering and going all the way there to fight these Christ enemies when they're right here amongst us?
Very important point there, that the church was against it. When the Crusades got off track and weren't defensive and weren't actually army against army trying to defend their land because the Muslims were conquering, the church was against that. When they said, "Oh well, if they're a bunch of pagans and we got to kill them, why don't we just kill these pagans here, the Jews?" That was something condemned by the church, not supported by it. So I think that's a really important point. That even when the Crusades got off track, it was not something that was positive or supported by the church. Now, here's something else that I think is important. He's going to go on in the interview and talk about further on into history, once America has come to be a nation after the Revolutionary War, that the first war of America, it was actually a Muslim war. Like this has been something we've been fighting since our founding. The first war after the revolution that we fought was against the Barbary pirates, and those were Muslims who demanded tribute or else we're going to plunder. And many of the other nations in the world had been paying tribute to the Barbary pirates, and America now is a new nation, and they're not paying tribute. So they're going to plunder American ships. And so Thomas Jefferson had to deal with this. And I'll let Raymond make more points on that.
After that, and now it's its own country, its first war is with Muslims, the Barbary Wars. And again, they're acting exactly on the same logic. And Thomas Jefferson, this great paragon of enlightened thinking, didn't know Islam as well as he should have, because when he met with what the Barbary pirates are doing is actually attack. So this is very interesting because it goes back to the idea of jizya. So a lot of these European powers, and I'll get to your point, but I'm just trying to build it up to show you what happened. But a lot of these European powers, instead of fighting with the Barbary Muslim pirates of North Africa, whose entire economy consisted of slave raids on Europeans, as far as Iceland they would go and enslave them, started just paying them off, which the Muslims took as jizya, tribute. Okay. Now, when the U.S., the United States, America broke away from Britain, it was no longer covered by Britain's jizya payments. And once the Muslims found that out, they started attacking American vessels in the Atlantic and in the Mediterranean and enslaving them and engaging all sorts of horrific, abuses against them. I talk a lot about that in one of my books, Sword and Scimitar. Actually, I have a whole chapter about it. Because if you really read about what was happening to European slaves, including these American ones, it was really sick stuff. Anyway, so that's what provoked the first war of America with the Barbary. But when Jefferson and John Adams met, they tried to, find a diplomatic solution. So they met with one of the ambassadors from Barbary, Abdul something. And they say to him, "Hey, why can't we just have peaceful trade and work together, et cetera?" Typical Americans. And he basically, he sounds like an ISIS guy. He goes, "Our prophet and our holy book says you are the infidel, you're the enemy, and it's our right to plunder, kill, and enslave you until you acknowledge Allah alone."
Yeah. So, and this is historic Islam, guys. This is what Islam has always been. Even today, there's a massive slave trade in Islamic countries. They own slaves. They sell slaves. We think of slavery as in America, we think of it as people from Africa being stolen by white people and brought to America. Actually, people in Africa were never stolen by white people. They were stolen by black people in Africa and sold to white people. But even that, white people were the first people to actually end slavery in the world. The world has always owned slaves. And if you were to count up all the slaves that were ever owned in all the world, the majority of them were probably white people. And many, 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 many of them were owned and still are owned by Muslims. If you are anti-slavery, you need to be anti-Islam, or at least anti most of Islamic countries in the world. You should be against them because they are pro-slavery. And yet somehow the American left doesn't see that as a inconsistency. They're big for the Muslim countries, but we're against slavery, we're not racist. Well, wait a minute. Muslims are racist, majorly racist. And I think that's something that we often forget. We're starting to run out of time for the episode today, so I want to give you just a couple more clips here from Raymond Ibrahim. This time he's going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of Islam, which I think is fascinating, and what's going on today and how they're invading countries, but they're really quite weak militarily speaking. Like the Islamic countries are not strong countries, but yet the ideology is spreading. And how is that happening? Because they're not in a strong position right now. I think this is a very interesting point.
Is the Islamic world, as I was kind of telling you, its entire economy was based on war and plunder and the slave system. Okay, they never produced anything the way Europe eventually went to, especially technologically and militarily. So I think once any Muslim region power is unable to conquer and plunder, it has no economy and it starts falling apart. Natives from the colonial era, they talk about it as the greatest time. This is the time when we had learning, when we had medicine, when we had science and technology, because the Europeans also brought this stuff with them. They did, right? Whereas, if you look at places that Islam conquered, there's places in Spain where they had that constant war in the middle. You had the Christians in the north and that are just until now like infertile and just totally devastated. Islam's appeal was it's the strong horse, and if you join us, you get all these benefits that we were talking about. And once Muslims start seeing that wasn't the case, it's really fell by the wayside. In as much as the West exuded power and confidence, Muslims followed it, and which is human nature. Whoever's strong or smarter than you or whatever you can learn from, you're going to try to emulate. But once the West sort of started hating itself and promoting everyone else, so let's say in the 1960s, just to give a rough date, where all of a sudden now, it was all how the narrative became Europeans are the horrible people, everyone is great. And in fact, Islam is even better, and Islam is what a wonderful religion. I think that actually pushed Muslims back. It's very easy to have contempt and disdain for someone who just disrespects themselves and fawns over you. That's just human nature. They basically said, yeah, you're right. You're just a bunch of dirty infidels.
So this is exactly what you would expect, right? When we disrespect ourselves and say, look at all of our atrocities. Muslims are a religion of peace. What Muslims hear is, they're weak, right? But actually, Islam hasn't really produced much of anything ever. Like, Islam has only produced war and violence. It doesn't produce thriving societies. It doesn't produce positive results. This is a bad ideology. It's a bad religion. It's a dangerous one and has produced lots of danger around the world, even to this day. And it's an ideology that needs to be defeated, like 100% needs to be defeated. I'll give you one more clip from Raymond Ibrahim before we run out of time today. This is on the fact that Islam is weak right now.
Here's the difference between Islam historically and Islam today. The continuity is that Muslims are creating problems. Okay, they did it historically, the violence and the intolerance and the supremacism. Okay, and it's happening now in the present. The difference is historically, like I said, it was the jihad of force. Right? They had no choice. No one was going to let them in. So Europeans fought tooth and nail, fighting to the death. Now they're a weak force. Why are they a problem? And the answer is because the West makes them a problem. All the problems that the UK is going through, for an example, and not just UK, much of Western Europe, it's all self-made, okay? And you know that because I can look at an Eastern country like Hungary, and it has none of these problems. They just said, no immigration. We don't want it. And guess what? No problem. Islam is inherently weak right now, physically, economically, militarily. It can't do what it does. But why is it doing it? It's because Western elements are are empowering and allowing it.
Yep. It's leftist ideology in the West that has given a strength to Islam that it hasn't earned. Islam is on the way out militarily, in really every way, except for in the West, it's on the way up. Because why? Well, because we can't have closed borders, and we can't discriminate, and we can't do all this stuff. Well, I think that's foolish. I think we do need to discriminate against dangerous things. And I think there is a large number of dangerous ideologies and thoughts and things that come from Islam. And I think we have to acknowledge that. So when Tucker Carlson says radical Islam isn't a threat, I think he's wrong. When the conservatives at AIMFest say, look, the biggest threat that we face as a country is radical Islam, I think that's absolutely true. I just don't think that what they're thinking of is actually radical Islam. It's just it's proper it's Islam historically. It's historical Islam is what we're talking about. This is the problem. Now there is some modern Islam that's Muslims that are peaceful and all that kind of stuff, but that does not mean that the ideology itself produces peace. It is counter to their own ideology that they are peaceful. The religion itself actually produces dangerous conditions for a society like America that values equality and freedom and individual liberties and all of those things. The Muslim faith is counter to those things. It's against us. And it always has been since the very founding of the country. And I think it's important that we remember that and pray that God will help us defeat this very dangerous ideology. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Point of View.
In a nation divided, in a time of shadows, and rises a call that echoes through every valley, every church, every heart that still believes in truth. For Christ and Country tells the powerful story of conviction, courage, and unwavering faith in the face of opposition. It is the story of a man who refused to bow. In these pages, you'll witness a modern struggle for truth, a stand not just for one man, but for every American who believes that faith still matters. From author Drew Thomas Allen comes a stirring tribute to courage, sacrifice, and the unshakable hope found in Christ. This is the time. This is the fight. This is the story of a nation worth saving, for Christ and for country.
All right, folks, you're going to have to hold on to your hats today. It's one of those really busy news days. You know, there were 20 stories that I want to talk about that are important, but I've only got time for about 5. I'm going to weave in as many as I can here. And don't worry, you're in good hands. I will focus on those stories that are pertinent right now today. And there are other stories regarding Jack Smith and others that I will get to next week. So don't worry, I will keep you abreast. I am, of course, the Millennial Minister of Truth. Now, first, I want to focus on this Davos, Switzerland, World Economic Forum meeting of the great minds that, was just underway. And I want to open by just saying this, an observation. Trump is just such a force of nature. He is the ultimate alpha male. It is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. This human being just dominates every space that he enters, and he absolutely dominated in Davos. And it was so refreshing to watch because what you had was a courageous America first representative in Trump and his administration who put the globalists in their place. You have to remember what the World Economic Forum is all about. Its existence is to promote globalist ideals. And globalism is anti-American. It is an underlying belief. I mean, it's global socialism is what globalism really comes down to. It is about redistributing the wealth and the innovation from the United States of America and Americans to the rest of the world. And the effect of that is to hurt America and bring us down a peg or 2 or 10, and to uplift other nations that are going to exploit us. And Gavin Newsom, I think his presidential ambitions ended in Davos personally. Some people don't like that. They really want to make sure he's the nominee because they think that he's the easiest guy to beat, and that may very well be true. But he humiliated himself. And he did it to himself. I've got some clips I want to play that, but first I just want to play Donald Trump, one of my favorite clips of the president from Davos, which just, you've got to celebrate. I love this man. Listen to this.
To embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, we must reject the perennial prophets of doom and their predictions of the apocalypse. They are the heirs of yesterday's foolish fortune tellers, and I have them, and you have them, and we all have them. And they want to see us do badly, but we don't let that happen. They predicted an overpopulation crisis in the 1960s, mass starvation in the 70s, and an end of oil in the 1990s. These alarmists always demand the same thing: absolute power to dominate, transform, and control every aspect of our lives. We will never let radical socialists destroy our economy, wreck our country, or eradicate our liberty. America will always be the proud, strong, and unyielding bastion of freedom.
That is the perfect, concise 54-second rebuttal to the World Economic Forum and the socialists around the world and in this very country and the cabal of globalists. They are batting 0 for 1,000 on their predictions, and they used, these so-called energy crises. They used, the climate prediction, the climate hoax, and all of it was about taking power, undermining the citizen, and making us subservient to the government. It was about government control of our lives. And they have abandoned the climate change hoax altogether completely now. And that was on display a lot too, although I'm not going to get into those clips. But it was astounding to listen to people who pushed the climate hoax for decades show up and basically admit that they were lying to us. Oh, yeah, we can't. It was the things that we've been saying forever. We need energy. We need electricity. We need these things. And we are not affecting the climate. And now they're acknowledging it. And this is what I don't understand if you're a Democrat out there. Just like the COVID hysteria. You bought into a complete lie. You are willing to give away all of your rights because the Democrats told you to. They lied to you and me about everything, about the efficacy of the vaccines, about the threat of COVID itself to your health. We were all going to die, and it was the flu. And all of that turned out to be true. That is to say, what I was saying at the time and attacked for, what many of you were saying and were attacked for and lost friendships, and family relationships were strained over it. You were right. And they've all admitted it. But the Democrats and the voters out there still support these people who lied to them forever. It's astounding. Now, let's get into Gavin Newsom. Now, before I play these clips of Gavin Newsom, I just want to explain something because I live in the state of California, and people who don't live here cannot understand what a disaster it is. My electric bill, gas electric combined with PGE, they have an unholy alliance with the state, a monopoly. My gas electric bill, this previous billing cycle for a month, was $1,500. My father, who lives in Texas, who has a house that's twice the size of mine here in California, doesn't spend more than $300 if he keeps the heater on 24/7. I've got a, 2,000 roughly square foot house, and I'm paying $1,500 a month for my gas electric bill. And why is that? Why is California's gas and electric prices and gasoline prices, why are they the highest in the country? Because of their policies. That's why. How does that help the middle class or anyone, frankly? They could change that in an instant, but they don't. That's Gavin Newsom. Now, California, you may not realize, accounts for 25% of the homeless population in the entire country. And since Gavin Newsom became governor in 2019, remember, he's on the last leg of his governorship right now. He can't run again. He's not running. This is the last leg this year. But since he became governor in 2019, California has spent $27 billion on these homeless programs. And yet the homeless population under Gavin Newsom has grown by 20,000 people, not declined. And at the very same time that the homeless population is expanding by 20,000, California has suffered a net domestic population loss, actually every year since 2020. This is the first sustained population decline in California's state history. So you've got people leaving the state, and yet the homeless population is increasing by 20,000. It's unbelievable. California ranks last in the nation for affordability and for opportunity. We have the highest poverty rate in the United States when you adjust for cost of living. It's just a complete disaster. Home ownership is completely out of reach for young families in this state. It's 2.5 times the national average, the home price is here in California. The median home price in California, do you know what it is? It's $850,000. So Californians need well over $200,000 a year just to get a mortgage to buy a modest home. And this is a state where the median household income is barely $90,000. So you got two people working and they're only making $90,000 a year. They can't buy a home in California. You know, California spends more, per pupil. They have lavish spending on public education. Where do you think the education system, K through 12, ranks in this country? 37th out of 50. And yet Newsom's out there, and his only talking point is, we're the 5th largest economy in the world. Well, how long is that going to last, Gavin? You've got billionaires and other high-income people in this state that are fleeing in record numbers, hence the population decline. Sacramento's over here flirting with a one-time billionaire tax, 5%. You think that that's going to keep you the 5th largest economy? What's that going to do? What's the real-world consequence of that, Gavin? People are going to flee. But Gavin Newsom could care less. He boards a jet and he flies over to the Swiss Alps to attend the World Economic Forum in Davos. While this state is in the disrepair that it's currently in, he takes a pause from his lucrative podcasting career while he's governor, and he goes over to Davos and lectures about how terrible Trump is. And what was amazing is, while this is happening, while Gavin Newsom is spitting his, basically all Gavin Newsom did was he took his little routine he's been practicing here and he delivered it for a foreign audience. He had his legs crossed like he's got a vagina. He had his hand gestures, his anger in his voice. All of that was present. It was the same thing. But he did it before a bunch of socialists that are going to agree with him, at least as it pertains to, the cabal of European elites. But I do want to play a few of these clips from him, and then I want to address them because it's over for Gavin Newsom. Let's start with this one.
Do you think that your party went too far or that you went too far? And I think, for instance, in extending Medi-Cal to the California healthcare program to undocumented immigrants. Two different I guess questions. On the big picture and the small picture, do you feel like you went too far?
Two different questions. Do I believe in universal health care? Yes, regardless of pre-existing conditions, ability to pay, and your status. I campaigned on that, and we delivered on that. And I'm proud of that. We're one of 16 states to provide care to people regardless of their immigration status.
Okay. You've had Democrats and their propagandists in the media insisting that it was not true that illegals were getting Medicaid. That is to say, taxpayer-funded health care. They've insisted that that's not a real thing. And here at the World Economic Forum, it's delicious. You have Gavin Newsom bragging about the fact that he's one of 16 states, Democrat states, that gives illegals health care. So he's admitting it. Now let's play another clip.
It's a remarkable thing to break down 80 plus years of alliances. It takes decades and decades to build trust in organizations, to architecture of that. It takes weeks, tweets, hours, minutes sometimes to destroy it. Destruction is not strength. The Trump administration is weakness masquerading as strength. And people need to understand that.
This guy should look in the mirror. This guy, Gavin Newsom, who I just gave you all the statistics, who has single-handedly destroyed what was once the most prosperous state in the entire country, the golden state of California, he's over there and has the audacity to accuse Donald Trump of destroying anything. And now he's focused there on the NATO relationship. And it's fundamentally not true. Prior to Trump, most NATO allies, they couldn't even meet the 2% defense spending benchmark. They couldn't even meet the 2%. Trump came in and said, no, you're going to meet your obligations. And what happened? Defense spending surged by billions of dollars. And as a matter of fact, many of these NATO allies have since agreed to contribute to spending levels that are around 5% of their GDP. So how exactly does Gavin Newsom arrive at the conclusion that Donald Trump has destroyed NATO by getting them to contribute billions more? Huh? He doesn't live in reality. But what are you going to do if you're Gavin Newsom and you have a record that you cannot possibly run on because your record is one of abject failure? So he's got to create a straw man. He's got to go on the attack against Trump and hope that people are too stupid to know that he's lying. Trump didn't destroy the NATO alliance. He restored its credibility by ending decades of European parasitic action, where there were a bunch of freeloaders, and he's demanding accountability now. Gavin Newsom is the one who's weak. He can't go over there and even stand up for America. He needs to put on those knee pads he's selling for himself. And actually, he did probably put on those knee pads hanging out with the Soros kid that I'll play in a minute. That dude, it's unbelievable. Billionaire's son. And the guy is dumber than Kamala Harris. You thought you heard a word salad with Kamala Harris speaking? Wait till I play this clip of the little Soros rat. Let's see if I've got one more here.
So I respect what Carney did because he had courage of convictions. He stood up. And I think we need to stand up in America and call this out with clarity. We can lose our republic as we know it. Our country can become unrecognizable in a matter of months, just not years. It is code red, blinking red in the United States of America. So forgive me, I feel this with passion, some indignancy, as someone frankly has taken it for granted all of these years. And it's why I came here to Davos to call it out. And
so, yeah, he goes to Davos to attack America and rip Trump. And this is what's so astounding. These people deeply hate America. Even if you have disagreements with Trump and we've got a two-party system and it's always heated and everything else, you're still an American. And the idea that these American politicians that are Democrats not only feel comfortable, but are eager to go on the world stage and bash America in front of a European audience shows how deep their betrayal runs. You just don't do that. You don't go to Europe and trash your country, no matter who the president is. And there he's commending Carney, the PM or president, whatever he is, of Canada, who just came out recently And it was an expression of something that's been boiling there beneath the surface for a long time. But he basically said he's going to cozy up to the Chinese, which they've already been doing, but he said it very publicly. China is our enemy, and China, frankly, is the world's enemy. And the other thing that's amazing is you don't hear these globalists ever say an ill word about China. They're over there trashing America, trashing Trump, calling him a fascist, saying democracy's in peril because of Trump, all of these things. It's a dictatorship, whatever. Meanwhile, you have an actual dictatorship in China who puts millions of Muslims in work camps and prisons, who disappears people on a daily basis if they simply speak out against the government, the communist regime. That's a dictatorship, but these people are going to embrace China and sit here and bash America. What does that tell you about these people? It tells you that they are loyal to these dictatorships. Their whole Trump's a fascist, we have fascism at home, it's a shtick. They don't believe it. They know it's not true. But they seek to benefit from their relationship with China because they're corrupt. And I'm sorry, your opinions about Donald Trump and his administration and America right now are rendered completely null and void if you won't even speak close to that about an actual communist dictatorship in the form of China. You have no room to speak, and there's no reason we should even listen to your opinion. It is rendered invalid. And while they're out there trashing America, Democrat politicians, Gavin Newsom, it was incredible because at the same time they're doing that, news is coming out about the economy, about crime under the Trump administration, thanks to the Trump administration, that proves definitively that these people are liars and frauds. Axios just reported the lowest murder rate since 1900, down 20% since 2024. The lowest murder rate since 1900. That's pretty good. Now, Axios didn't give Trump any credit, obviously. They just reported on it like it just happened magically. And at the same time, we got news that the U.S. economy outperformed forecasts. They revised the economic numbers upwards to 4.4%. Now, I remember I was living in New York City, I think, at the time. This was 2010. And remember, we were just trying to come out of the Great Recession. Things were very, very bleak. I had just come out of college. And thankfully, at the time, I was pursuing a career as an actor in Manhattan because my job prospects were already bleak. So it didn't do much to me mentally because I already knew I was in for a hard time. But President Obama told Americans in 2010 that Americans should accept that the new normal for GDP growth was 2%. And Donald Trump doubled it and then some, 4.4%. Listen to this clip.
I want to add that we economists were horribly wrong on the strength of the economy, especially in the second half of 2025. Many were looking for growth no faster than 1.5%. You point out 4.3% growth in the third quarter. We want to also consider the fact that real consumer spending at 3.5% was far better than what you would expect.
I mean, it's good news in the real world almost everywhere you look, except where Democrats have control. And Gavin Newsom's one of those people that has vowed to Trump-proof his state. What is Trump-proofing your state? Who would want to Trump-proof your state? That is synonymous with sabotaging a state's success. That means insulating California from falling crime, from rising wages and energy abundance, and border enforcement and economic growth. That's what Trump-proofing a state means. He's going to run on that. Why do these Democrat politicians, ask yourself this question, amidst all this good news, and it's objectively good news, you can't debate it because it's statistical. Why would Democrats not want every American to live under that sort of prosperity? Why would they want to shield you from opportunity? Why would they want to look at these statistics about falling crime and say, no, 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 no. We want you to experience life with increasing crime. The economy's improving. No, we're going to Trump-proof it. You're not going to have access to that. We're going to make it harder for you. Why would they do that? I'll tell you why. Because their entire shtick since 2016 has been a complete and utter lie. In fact, the entire belief system of the left and all of their policies are built on lies. The Democrat Party, a socialist party, they can only invite ruin upon your home. And everywhere they go and everywhere they implement their policies, like in California, where they only have Democrats doing everything, you get the statistics I gave you. Dead last in the country, almost everywhere you look. And they don't want Americans to equate their policies and their ideology with those effects. So they need a boogeyman. Donald Trump's the reason for it, not me. Meanwhile, these Democrats are saying, we're going to actually protect you from the best effects of the Trump administration and policies. You see, Democrats cannot have Americans wake up and realize that the Trump administration is working for the American people. They cannot tolerate that happening because it will end their political careers. That's why they do this. That's why they're fighting so hard against ICE to villainize and demonize and dehumanize them rather than the illegal criminals who are here. They need destruction so that they can project onto the political opposition and blame them for it, and then promote policies to reinforce their control. It's a sick, sick game, and I hope you wake up to how they function. Create a crisis, blame your opponents, and then present to the same gullible voters a singular option that is ultimately going to make the problem worse. It's a vicious cycle, and you cannot escape it with Democrat politicians. You have got to get away from the Democrat Party. You've got to get away from them. Wake up, people. Wake up out there. Wake your friends up. Wake your neighbors up. Wake your family up. So that's what happened at Davos. I want to play one more clip because it's just funny. Scott Bessent, I appreciate his sense of humor. Listen to him rip Gavin Newsom, Mr. I'm handing out knee pads and selling knee pads because, everyone's on their knees with Trump. Listen to this.
I think Gavin Newsom may be cracking up with some of these things he's saying. I think he may be in over his hairdo. And being on the national stage is very different than being governor of California with no signature achievements. But to say strange things like President Trump is the Tyrannosaurus Rex, what the hell does that mean? I could say Gavin Newsom is a brontosaurus with a brain the size of a walnut. And if he brought the knee pads, maybe that was for his meeting with Alex Soros. I don't know.
There you have it. Look, I will save making fun of little Alex Soros for the end of the show. We got a crank here because I got some stuff I want to get through, right? I want to talk about this latest Democrat hoax against ICE, and I'll do that in just a second, okay? What do 3 billionaires, 4 major banks, and a legendary 72-year-old investor all have in common? They're all making the same shocking prediction. Gold is headed for $10,000 or more. Goldman Sachs says gold will surge 20%. JP Morgan says 25%. And one respected economist now believes the U.S. government could deliberately raise gold's official price to help pay off the national debt. And the world's wealthiest players, they're already making their move. Now you can see exactly what they're seeing for free. Our friends at American Alternative Assets, they just released a powerful new report. You've heard me mention it before on the show. It's the surprising case for $10,000 gold, and you can get it for free. Go to cloutgold.com to download it, or you can call 855-803-GOLD. That's cloutgold.com or 855-803-GOLD. It breaks down the hidden signals, the central bank gold buying spree, and explains how smart Americans are protecting their retirement with gold right now. Don't wait. The window's closing fast. So I mean, it's impossible if you were spending any time watching the news or online that you wouldn't have encountered this horrific story told by the Democrats about how a young 5-year-old boy was, snatched out of the street and detained in Minneapolis. Now, what actually happened here? I don't have the image of, the Democrats promoting this. But, they painted it as, ICE, of course, are these monsters, and they called them monsters who are, just going after, it's like the invasion of the child snatchers or something. Isn't that what that UFO extraterrestrial movie was called a long time ago? Anyway, that's what they were spinning. And of course, it turns out that narrative is completely false. ICE agents showed up in Minneapolis. It's the dead of winter. There's ice and snow. It's freezing. They were there to arrest an illegal alien from Ecuador, which is their job. And as they approached the car that was in front of the person's house, wherever they lived, apartment, whatever it was, the illegal alien got out of the car and ran. In other words, he abandoned his 5-year-old son in the car. What kind of person does this? Is this somebody who's thinking at all about his son? ICE is coming. Okay, I'll leave my son. That's what happened. So the story falls apart immediately. And the Democrats used one image of ICE agents standing behind the 5-year-old boy by the car in the freezing cold, a snapshot of the entire scene, right? And they point to that, I guess. I don't know what they're trying to do. I guess their suggestion is that ICE is trying to freeze this kid, just having him stand out there in the cold. And that's not what happened. Now, ICE tried to take the kid indoors. They wanted to see if a parent was available to take care of him. They weren't trying to detain the kid. And the Democrats said they were using the kid as bait. No, they wanted to get him with a parent. And the mother, I guess, was inside the home, and she refused to open the door for ICE. She refused to let the kid come in the house. And so these ICE agents actually took the kid, they got him food, they played music for him, they kept him warm. They did what his parents refused to do for him. The ICE agents are heroes, and the parents, the illegal aliens, of course, who are already criminals, are garbage human beings. That's the story. But the left has to invert reality, invert morality again, because they are on a crusade to sell this narrative for a political policy objective to get rid of ICE because they need illegals to stay in this country. They need crime. Remember this, folks. If you take nothing else from this show, remember this. The lifeblood of the Democrat Party is disaster. Without disaster, they have nothing to run on. And this is why if Trump can be successful, the Democrat Party is done, because they won't have anything to do anymore. But that's their entire agenda. So anyway, that's what happened there. I want you to listen to Eric Swalwell here, though. He was on CNN. He's not a bright person, obviously. He looks like he's the product. He's inbred. That's what he looks like to me, as I've said on the show before. Inbred Eric. But listen to him talk about ICE and what he would do as governor of California.
What I've said as governor is I will use the powers of the office. If you're going to wear a mask as an ICE agent in your state, I will take away your driver's license. If you work for ICE, you will be unhirable in the state. If you're going to work for fascists, forget about working in the state. So we are not weak. We have to go on offense. Otherwise, the most vulnerable in our communities are on defense. And I urge every governor to start protecting their people in their state that way.
Do you think every ICE agent on the streets is a fascist?
I think that if you continue to work for them now, seeing what they're doing, dragging women by their hair through the streets, deporting a 4-year-old, battling stage 4 cancer, shooting a mother in the face 3 times, if you still work for them, that's a choice. No one's forcing you to do that. I don't want you working in the state.
So he didn't say a truthful word there at all, except for the fact that he's a fascist who would treat federal employees like Jews in Nazi Germany. That's the fascist, Eric Swalwell. He's talking about Renee Good, of course, there, shot in the face 3 times. Yeah, well, we know all about Renee Good. And by the way, there was something I didn't get into, but now it's coming up. I wanted to get into this like several shows ago. I want you to know this about Renee Good. So she decided to become a lesbian and move to Minneapolis after her husband died. So husband died. She's like, well, you know what? I'm going to become a lesbian. That sounds like a good life strategy. So Renee Good moves to Minneapolis. She puts her son in a social justice K-5 charter school. They use radical curriculum. The Bush Foundation, they had given 11 grants totaling $2.5 million to this curriculum, Education Evolving, it's called. They also funded Ice Watch networks via COPAL, C-O-P-A-L. And then Renee Good gets recruited through this Southside charter school where she put her son into these Ice Watch networks. And then she got killed after activation by these Ice Watch networks. And by the way, he talks about this 4-year-old kid who had cancer that we were deported. No, the kid went with his parents. His parents took him back with them to wherever they came from. Would he prefer that the kid be separated from his parents? I thought that this is what the Democrats were opposed to. You can't separate the children from their parents. Well, we didn't. They allowed this child to go with the parents who were being deported. And why is it suddenly that simply being a father or being a mother, having a son, does that mean that you can violate the law because you have a kid? I mean, imagine if that was how things worked out here, right? Oh, nope. I robbed a bank, but listen to me. I have a kid, and you cannot put me in prison because my kid needs me. Oh, you're an illegal criminal gangbanger, but you got a kid, so, you got to take care of your family and sell drugs. We understand that. This is the logic of them, which is illogic. There's no logic whatsoever. And I would say, again, these Democrats, every time you have some mass shooting, they say it's the gun, right? If there were no guns, there would be no gun deaths. Well, where's that logic when it applies to illegals? We've got many thousands of Americans who have been killed or raped by illegals. If there were no illegals in this country, guess what? You wouldn't have those deaths. You wouldn't have those rapes. Laken Riley, who Joe Biden called Lincoln Riley, Laken Riley would be alive if Joe Biden hadn't allowed illegals into this country and then flown them to their destination of choice. Kate Steinle, remember her? Who was killed on the pier in San Francisco by an illegal? She would still be alive, and a father and mother would still have their beautiful daughter if there weren't illegals here. So you know what? If it saves one life, right? Got to get rid of all the illegals. Got to get rid of all the illegals. All right. This may be unpopular with some of you, but obviously I don't care. I'm not a fan of Thomas Massie, never have been. I think that he's a fraud, a grandstander, and he's condescending and arrogant, and I'm just not a fan. But I want to lay out for you, if you say, Drew, you're awful, Thomas Massie is the best thing that ever happened. He's the only true guy. We love him like we love traitor Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's fine. Well, listen to me tell you this story. So Thomas Massie, this is actually written by Colin Anderson. This is actually from last year, October 16th, 2025. It's from the Washington Free Beacon. Now, Massie is very much, he likes to speak out against Israel. He doesn't like Israel. And many people chalk that up to, he's really, truly America first. He doesn't, want Jews to do X, Y, Z. And that's where that's coming from. It's just pure motives, right? This guy's not bought and paid for. Everyone else is. Well, let me just read some of this to you. The headline is Strange Bedfellows Meet the Pack Working to Re-elect Thomas Massie and Partnering with the DSA to Fight ICE. Oh, interesting. You mean an organization that is anti-ICE is partnering with Massie to help re-elect him? Interesting story, huh? So remember, this is October 16, 2025. The embattled Kentucky congressman traveled to Pennsylvania to meet with IPAC around the time its founder wrote his campaign a check. Earlier this year in June, so this would be last June, Integrity Political Action Committee announced a new coalition with the Democratic Socialists of America aimed at fighting ICE's crackdown on immigration violations. 2 months later, an unlikely figure traveled to the area to meet with IPAC's leaders, Representative Thomas Massie, the man who describes himself as Kentucky's most conservative congressman. My, why would Thomas Massie take a meeting with a political action committee that has announced a coalition with the Democrat Socialists of America that are aimed at fighting ICE? I thought that Massie supported deportation because he's a libertarian, America first. Here's a social media post that I'm referring to. So this shows Massie smiling alongside IPAC chairman Rafed Al-Jabouri in what appears to be a private home in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, a Scranton suburb. 1 week earlier, Al-Jabouri contributed $500 to Massie's campaign, according to campaign finance disclosure. Al-Jabouri spoke at the press conference where IPAC launched its partnership with the DSA and compared ICE agents to Nazis. I mean, I thought we held politicians, and Massie certainly holds politicians to a higher standard. Why would he be shown smiling? Why would he be willing to meet with somebody who has compared ICE agents to Nazis, who's aligned with the Democrat Socialists of America? Now, Massie has said if you enter this country illegally, you broke the law and you should be deported. But IPAC says it stands with Representative Thomas Massie and supports his reelection campaign. That's kind of an odd combination, don't you think? Massie says he supports ICE and deportations. IPAC compares ICE to Nazis and is aligned with the Democrat Socialist in America. And they're supporting Thomas Massie? What's going on here? And Massie, of course, told the Washington Free Beacon that he's not familiar with the Integrity Political Action Committee or its position on immigration. That's kind of odd. You're going to meet with the founder of this thing and you didn't do any research into him? Are you lazy, Thomas Massie? It's kind of a big deal. At the event, Massie said, I said what I've said publicly, which is that I'm against the war in Gaza. America should not fund the war. Too many innocent people have died. And I would like to see a peaceful settlement to the conflict as soon as possible. You know, folks, I'm just going to be honest with you. It's fine if you have disagreements with Israel out there. But, you know, I don't think I need to explain it. You know, there's a big difference with disagreeing with Israel on policy, just like you might disagree with Trump on some policy, and being a Trump hater with TDS and an anti-Semite. I don't need to spell it out for you. You know where you are on that. And so a lot of this anti-Israel rhetoric, I don't think is grounded in the simple disagreement about policies and America first. Because it is America first, as we saw in Venezuela, to take certain actions outside of our country that are in our best interest. And so I question, with this relationship that we see here with Massie, the authenticity of his motivations. And you should too. All right, now we got to crank. I'm running out of time. I mean, it gets worse. You know, you can go check out this article, Strange Bedfellows, look it up. I mean, the people that this PAC that is supporting Massie is involved with are straight up anti-Semites. They're Holocaust deniers, or worse, they're pro-Jewish genocide. You know, Jackson Hinkle's one person that this group frequently reposts, who's a self-described communist who's met with Houthi terrorists in Yemen and attended the funeral of former Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. So anyway, all right, let's just get into. I don't think I'm going to have time to get into the FCC. We'll see. This is important, I think. So the House advanced a $1.2 trillion package with ICE funding. And, you know, this is just an example of messy politics. Thomas Massey's going to enter the story here. That's why I gave you the background on him. Now, this legislation just narrowly passed. It cleared a procedural hurdle called a rule vote. You know, we don't need to get into a deep explanation. You know, it's complex how the chambers function. Now, one of the big hurdles was there's a GOP rebellion over immigration and customs enforcement funding and ethanol fuel. And this is going to fund the Departments of War, Education, Labor and Health and Human Services. And another one's going to fund the Department of Homeland Security. So this includes the funding for ICE, which obviously is significant right now. All the left wants is to dismantle ICE, so it's really important that we put our foot down and fund ICE. And also, the majority of Americans support deportation, and we need to fund it. I support funding it. And frankly, the money's well spent because the money we would save if we deported the 20 million plus illegals in this country, that's how you make a dent. So one of the contentions with this bill, like I said, it passed. But one of the problems was Midwestern Republicans, they threatened to sink the rule vote if the spending bills didn't include a provision allowing a year-round sales of ethanol fuel called E15. Now, I hate ethanol. This needs to be taken out of the cars. This has been in place for too long. But the problem is you've got entire groups now and lobbyists, you know, who want this because they make money off of it, right? Ethanol comes from corn. We're not eating all the corn. It's going into ethanol, which isn't useful. And frankly, it's counterproductive to our vehicles. So I hate this, but am I going to sink? You know, so anyway, these people fought to get, you know, year-round sales of ethanol fuel. I don't like it, but I'm a political realist, and it's about ultimately moving the ball forward. And so whatever, that's what they fought about, and they got it in the bill. Now, there was another issue. Now, Democrats weren't going to support this unless, that they wanted ICE to be required to wear body cams and to undergo additional training about interaction with the public. So Republicans said, okay, we'll do that. All right. I mean, you've got to compromise. We have a slim majority. We don't have an option. So that's a very, very minimal concession to make to Democrats, I think. Now, here's what was contentious for a lot of people. And this is where I think a lot of you will be conflicted and fired up. 57 Republicans voted with the vast majority of Democrats on Thursday to keep a Biden-era mandate enabling government remote control of vehicles, drawing backlash. Massey put forward an amendment to counter language under current law that requires the development of the kill switch technology. Now, yes, I agree this is Orwellian. I agree it's outrageous that the government could have the possibility of accessing your vehicle to turn it off. Absolutely not. I'm sorry. It's not worth giving that up. Our freedom, you know what I mean? Well, what if somebody's, a terrorist and they're in the car running away? We should be able to. No. Sorry. There are certain prices we just have to pay, inconveniences, the hard way we have to pursue things for our freedom. So this is outrageous that this ever existed to begin with. So this switch would passively monitor the performance of a driver of a motor vehicle and prevent or limit motor vehicle operation if impairment is detected. So it's about DUIs, drunk drivers, allegedly, right? Well, if we see someone's drunk, we can shut that vehicle down to save a life. And it's always, for the greater good that they take your liberty. Now, this has not been implemented. There's no way this is going to be implemented, even if it's a holdover from the Biden era auto pin regime. So Massey voted against this because he wanted that amendment in there to strip this, and it just wasn't going to happen. And this is where you have to be a realist. My problem with Massey is that he isn't a realist. He's a guy who can never, ever get anything done because he's a purist, and no one's ever going to pass a purity test. You cannot get anything done when you're unwilling to make any concessions anywhere. But you can still win despite being a realist. So let me give you an example. Massey could vote for this despite this kill switch not being taken out now because he knows that the Trump administration is not going to activate it. And you know, there are still other bills that can be passed in the future. This was about one thing only, and it was about funding ICE. It was about funding ICE. And funding ICE is more important right now than getting rid of this kill switch language. It's not developed yet. And it could only happen if Democrats were in office. And they're not right now. Trump's still in there for another 3 years. So this is the thing with Massey. He claims to be this brilliant, intelligent person, but he's stupid. Can you not prioritize? So if Massey doesn't get 100% of what he wants all the time, he's going to vote against stuff. That's not leadership, folks. I'm sorry. That's not leadership. And so Thomas Massey is no different than the radical leftist ideologues who are destroying the Democrat Party, which I support wholeheartedly. But he's as radical as they are in his own way. Now, in this case, I agree with Massey. I don't like this switch. I think it is Orwellian. DeSantis spoke out about it. But what's more important right now? Funding ICE or dealing with this now? This is the thing. This guy can't prioritize. He can't think clearly. And I don't like Massey for that reason. Now, I was going to get in the FEC. Let me just give you like a 90-second summary about this FCC, Federal Communications Commission. Now, this goes back to, look, we know that the media is just they're evil. They're evil. They are propagandists for the Democrat Party, and all they do is tell lies every single day. Now, these broadcasters, there is regulatory guidance that already exists. But Brendan Carr is finally taking the fight to these people. Now, look, the Democrats' rhetoric is getting people killed. I wrote about it in my book, For Christ and Country, The Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. They dehumanize us. And that combined with the fact that they are radicalizing amoral people in this country with an ideology that makes themselves God, that answers to no transcendent power, that believes that the ends justifies the means, that can create a scenario in this very country where leftists are celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a husband and father and a decent human being, a leader of the conservative movement. The left is doing that. They're responsible for that. And they don't change their rhetoric. And that's why it's important that we address that issue. And it's in my book. And I wrote that book to give fuel to what Brendan Carr is suggesting now. So get this book, read this book, share this book. Brendan Carr is right. And I wrote about Brendan Carr in my book. And I wanted him to do this very thing. Brendan Carr did not read this book. And he's not doing it because of me. But he is directing broadcast stations to ensure that political candidates are given equal opportunities on programs such as morning shows and late night comedy. So, there's this long-standing assumption that these shows automatically qualifies these bona fide news programs. They're not. And he has the authority to do this. And we can't fear how the left is going to abuse power. This isn't abuse of power. These are desperate times. We know what the left's going to do if they win. You can't live your life and make your decisions strategically based on fear that the left. We know what the left is already playing in a different world. They don't have any restrictions. So the FCC simply reminded them of their obligation to provide all candidates with equal opportunities. So he cited The View as an example of a show that could face scrutiny. And conservative attorney Daniel Sewer, who heads the Center for American Rights and has supported Carr's agenda, praised the move, said it could apply broadly to late night television. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel used his show to go out after Charlie Kirk's assassination and claim that a MAGA person shot Charlie Kirk. You can't do that. And if you look at the FCC guidelines, or just read my book and I'll explain it in there, For Christ and Country, the Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk, there are existing guidelines, requirements that actually prohibit Jimmy Kimmel from doing what he did on that late night show. There was an ongoing investigation, and you cannot go out and tell falsehoods. And that's what he did. But obviously there's resistance because, the First Amendment and the purity test. And, we don't want to go down this road, but, we've got to go down some different roads right now to save the country. So anyway, this is what's going on with the FCC. Now, let's just finish up by having a good old-fashioned laugh at Alex Soros, who thinks that the size of his glasses is somehow directly related to his intelligence. Listen to him.
I don't think that's the fundamental. I don't think the technology is the fundamental issue in democracy. Democracy is messy. I mean, democracy is about contestation of ideas. It's about plurality. It's about people having different truths, actually. Now, fundamentally, how society lives together civically in those contestations is obviously quite tricky. But I think that if we play to
it's obviously quite it's this thing that it's a tricky policy. Civics goes together like mishmash and mashed potatoes and steak, and if you combine the technical stuff, you understand what exactly. This is one of the stupidest people I've ever heard speak in my life, and this is what I'm talking about. These spoiled little elitists. This guy naturally was born with a low IQ. It's probably not his fault that he's this stupid. I'm sure he got the best education that his billionaire, Jew-hating, pro-Nazi, who turned in Jews could get. But this is what you have. Spoiled little brat, billionaire, never earned anything, who doesn't have a coherent thought coursing through his veins and brain. And that's how he speaks. And these are the people that are plotting behind the scenes to destroy your country and your life. That kid right there. I want you to think hard about that. That guy you just heard, he has more power than almost any human being in this country. That little puke. And you can apply that to most of your politicians out there. Look at Joe Biden. Look at the people that were running this country. The people that are still running this country in some ways. That's who's doing it. Does that make you feel good? Honestly, that should encourage you. Encourage you because you are being ruled by your inferiors most of the time. So you should get involved and do some stuff. You should get involved in politics. You should put your hat in the ring. You should seek out ways to advance our pro-American liberty agenda. Because that dude's going to do it if you don't. And he's way more retarded than any of you or me. All right, folks. I love you all. This is Drew Allen, your Millennial Minister of Truth. Share this episode far and wide. Do me a favor. I never ask favors. I need this favor. If you find the Drew Allen Show, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, review the show. Give it a 1-star review. No, it's not a 1-star. Give it a 5-star review. Review the show. I never asked to do that, but it matters, and I haven't done it in a long time. So anyway, do that. Check out the book, For Christ and Country, the Martyrdom of Charlie Kirk, and I will be with you soon. God bless you all. Have a tremendous weekend. Can't wait till next time.
We're about news, commentary, conversations, truth, liberty, and God. We stand for American values and our flag. We believe that the Constitution is a document that fortifies rights already given to us by our Creator. We will not apologize for our love of God and country, ever. We are Right America Media.